I have come across two stones in northern New Mexico that are absolutely not something that is typical to this part of the country. The stones, I contend, were created by Templar Knights. The Templar Knights of fame of the Crusades in Jerusalem and associated with vast treasure.
Hey YouTube online here, we've got a guy that I tracked down because he's found something that I think is out of place archaeology and it really interested me and he's willing to talk to us. So with that said, I'll let him tell who he is and what he's got to share with us. Go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Terry, and thank you for letting me do this interview with you because I really want to get the word out on this whole project, my book, the experience with these Knights Templar, and all of the different questions that go with it. So thank you very much for
Thank you
having
for
me
being willing to
on this
share with
interview.
us because when I seen what you had, I was pretty excited about it. So thank you.
Okay, well, let me introduce myself so that our friends that see this will know who they're talking to. My name is Louis Serna, and I'm from New Mexico, born here in New Mexico, born in the northern part of the state, up in Springer, New Mexico. And I grew up there, and when I was about 14 years old, my family moved to Cimarron, which is about 20 miles away at the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains include Wheeler Peak. Wheeler Peak is the highest mountain in New Mexico at 13,000 feet, so it's pretty well up there. And what we're going to be talking about today is a couple of stone pillars. They're obelisk shaped. They have some amazing carvings on them, symbols that I contend can only be from the Middle East because of what the symbols look like. So, like I said, my family moved to Cimarron when I was like 14 years old, and I finished high school there. And in the process of going to high school, I met a really pretty girl that wound up becoming my wife.
Awesome.
We were sweethearts all through high school. And I have to mention her because her mother was a lady by the name of Tessie Maxwell. My wife's name is Gloria Martinez. Okay? Tessie Maxwell is a descendant of the Maxwell family of the Cimarron area, who were the owners of the huge Maxwell land grant. Now, this land grant included a big part of northern New Mexico and on into southern Colorado. It was a big, big deal. Okay? Now, I bring that up because all of those little towns up in that part of the country, they either sprang up at the time of the Maxwell land grant primarily to service the land grant. The owner was a fellow by the name of Louis Maxwell, a great uncle of my wife Gloria's mother. Louis Maxwell ruled his land grant like a European baron. Okay, he made a ton of money, made a lot of money out of his land grant by way of gold that was mined on his property up in, again, northern New Mexico, and coal and all kinds of resources, lumber, cattle, just made a fortune out of it. Now, I bring that up because these stones were found on that land grant property Okay,
So when was this land grant? What year are we talking?
Yeah, the land grant dates back to like the middle 1800s. Okay. And he wound up selling it. Lucian Maxwell wound up selling it in the late 1800s. He sold it to a foreign syndicate, a British-Dutch investing team. He sold it to them, and it wound up in court because at the time that he sold it, he claimed that it was 2 million acres, okay, which is a lot of acreage.
That's a lot of acreage.
Yeah, but it was contested because it wasn't that many acres. It was close to it, but not that many. That was one problem. Another problem is that during the time that he owned that land grant, excuse me, he had allowed miners, settlers, farmers, and others to come onto the property and provide goods and services to him. But he was the kind of guy that never did very much on paper. So he allowed these people to come on his land. Well, at the time that he sold it, the new owners tried to rid themselves of these people that were on the land grant. And a huge lawsuit ensued, and it took years to resolve, but by then he was gone. Okay, so enough on the land grant. Okay, I just wanted to introduce that part of that country because, like I said, these stones came up on his property, were found on his property, way up in the mountains where really nobody went because it's just way up there. So I'm going to move on from there to let the folks know where I found out about these stones.
Yeah.
Okay. I have done quite a bit of writing. I've been doing research and writing about northern New Mexico and Southwest history and history of New Mexico for, wow, let's see, I'm 77, so I guess it's been over 50 years now that I've been doing this. And over that time, I've written several books, somewhere around 15 of them, about northern New Mexico, the history of it, and etc. So I'm always keeping my eye open for anything that I see that has something historical about it that I might want to write about. I love sharing all this information. Well, in 2013, my wife and I were in Cimarron to help celebrate my mother's 95th birthday. I come from a large family. I had 9 brothers and 2 sisters. One sister and one brother have passed now, but we were a large family there in northern New Mexico, and we were there to celebrate my mother's birthday. When we went up there to do that, because we live in Albuquerque, we usually stayed at the St. James Hotel. And let me show you what that looks like. Tell me if you can see this.
Yep, I can see that. Yep.
Okay. This is a picture of the St. James Hotel. In its heyday, this was a wild and crazy place. Some of history's wild guys came there and stayed there. Some of the people that came there were Clay Ellison, Wyatt Earp, Jesse James, Pat Masterson, guys like that. They came there because it was the place to come and gamble and do the things that wild people at that time did. It was also a place where there were a lot of shootouts. They would get into fights in the bar there, and people got killed. Several of them got killed. A lot of them came there, never left. So the St. James Hotel is still in operation, and it's quite famous. So we are in Cimarron, my wife and I, helping celebrate my mother's birthday. We're staying at the St. James Hotel, and inside the hotel they have pictures, lots of pictures of famous characters that have come to there and through there. I had been there many times before, and I took a little walk around through the lobby there and on into a hallway where they have all kinds of, like I said, pictures. I'm on my way back getting ready to leave, and out of the corner of my eye, I see what looks like a stone pillar, marker of some kind. And it's standing next to a desk in the lobby, kind of tucked away where you really wouldn't see it if you weren't looking for it. So I walked up to it, and I took a good look at it, and I thought to myself, wow, this is something that does not belong here. Now, that part of the country is also famous because of the Santa Fe Trail that comes through there, going back into the 1800s. I asked the girl at the desk, if she knew what this stone pillar was. And she said, yes, that's a Santa Fe Trail marker. And I kind of didn't say anything to her, not to embarrass her, but I knew that it definitely was not that, okay? So I went back, took another good look at the stone, and I took some pictures. So let me show you a couple of pictures that I have reproduced onto a model here that is the actual size of this stone pillar. It's obelisk shaped, and I'll just show you what it looks like here. We'll have to do the best we can in view of where we are. But if you can see it,
yep.
This is the top of it, right about my head level here. And I assume that you can make out these symbols that are carved on here.
Yep.
Now, at first, when I started doing research on these stones, in my mind, I assumed that this round circular symbol here was the sun symbol from the Middle East, the Egyptian Ra symbol. Now, I'm still kind of debating whether it's that or whether it might be something very peculiar. I learned since starting this research that way back in the past, there had been an explosion of a star in the heavens, and it was seen by very, very early people in the time of Christ, somewhere in there. This explosion had been seen in the sky, and for a short time, it appeared as if there were two suns in the sky. That's how bright it was.
Wow.
And I have seen on carvings in stone, petroglyphs from around the world, where indigenous people have picked out this round object with radiations coming off of it, several ways that they have depicted it. People, archaeologists, history hunters, have looked at those carvings, and they've had several opinions as to what it might be. At this point, I'm still kind of calling it a Ra symbol, a sun symbol. If I go further down, you'll see some pointed objects carved here. I contend that these represent the parapets at the top of King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. I've decided that this has to be relating to King Solomon's temple.
Really?
The way that these parapets are carved on the stone, they are on all four sides. Now, I haven't mentioned yet that this obelisk-shaped stone that was standing there in the lobby has four sides to it. And some of these carvings, some of these symbols, appear in the same place on all four sides. So if I assume that these might be representing the parapets at the top of King Solomon's temple, then it would make sense that they would be all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, below that is what I think represents a mosque. Okay? A Moorish mosque, which would be typical of something that would be in the Middle East. Now, again, doing further research, I discovered that the original temple, the original King Solomon's temple, looked like this. Now, there have been several books written by several archaeologists, and this same symbol appears in one of those books that I just happened to research this past week. I found this same outline, same silhouette in one of these books about the Knights Templar. Now, below that, we see a Knights Templar cross, sometimes referred to as a St. John's cross, but this is absolutely typical of a Templar Knight cross. Notice that there are 8 points to this cross. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 8-point star, the 8-point cross, was something that identified directly with Templar Knights. Below that is what appears to be half of a cup shape, you might say. I went over these symbols with a rabbi friend of mine here in Albuquerque, and he told me that in the ancient Jewish Hebrew symbols, this was a menorah.
Really?
Now, today a menorah has 13 or other numbers of candle holders, but the earliest menorah, according to my friend, had only 2. So, is this representative of menorah in the time of King Solomon or before? So, these are conclusions that I've drawn, okay, over time in researching this stone. Now, as I go further down, there appear to be letters here that have almost been worn away. One of them appears to be an M, and I cannot make out what the other ones are. But hopefully someday somebody with some authority and some experience will take on this project and inspect these stones and identify what these different symbols are, and hopefully read the message that is on these stones. Because I contend that they weren't just randomly carved on here. They're arranged in such a way that I feel they are a message left by Templars, Templar Knights, for other Templars who would come later. Okay? So let me just go around the other side and we'll take a look at some of these other symbols and then we'll move on. Here again, the Ra symbol or the sun symbol, but this time it appears to have a bar diagonally across it. And there appears to be something else carved in the center of that symbol. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Here we see those same parapets. Okay? Here we see what I think is a field. I'm calling these areas fields where something was carved in there, and over the ages, over the years, they have just
wore
out, okay? Wore out by weather, storms, etc. So I don't know what's in here. But again, hopefully somebody would know. Here we have another Templar cross. Absolutely a Templar cross. Below that, there are more what appear to be letters or symbols, and I can't make them out. But this appears to be a C, a letter C. This appears to be a letter O. When I went over this with my rabbi friend, he told me that these appear to be ancient Hebrew letters, okay? And he could not see enough of it to be able to tell what they meant or what they really are. And as we go further down, let me see if I can raise this up a little higher. We see something that has been carved here that appears to be a half of a circle of some kind. And of course, this is the bottom of the stone, so we don't know what was below that. More about the bottom of the stone in a minute. Let me go on to a third side to this stone. And again, let me point out that it is obelisk shaped.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, there was a reason why when they made something like this, they would shape it like an obelisk. They would shape it so it would come to a point. And that is because over time, over a long period of time, if this was flat on top, then it would be a place for water to sit on.
Wow.
If it was subject to being frozen, that water would freeze and become ice. And then that water would creep down into the pores of the rock, and when it froze again, it would split it. That's why they made them in this shape, so that the water would just run off. Again, the sun symbol, and I don't know if you can see it clear enough, but here it has radiations coming off of it, all around. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons why I thought this could possibly represent an exploding star that was seen in the sky way back when. Whatever that means in the overall, I don't know. We'll have to find out. Once again, the parapets on top of King Solomon's temple. Once again, a very prominent Templar cross. And once again, those same symbols that we saw on the other side. What appears to be a C and something else. And at the bottom now, we see another half circle carved into it. And when I saw this side of the stone, I noticed that it had something wedged under it to keep it upright. So I took a closer look, and I could see that the stone had been broken there. It wasn't flat on the bottom, it had been broken. Now, at this point, I need to kind of give you some history of the stone as to where it came from.
Yeah.
As I understand it, in 1986, a fellow that was supposedly hunting up in the mountains, way up there where this was originally found, he drove down to the hotel and had this laying in the back of his truck and asked if he could talk to somebody of authority there in town. One of the top ranchers in that area, very respectable rancher, happened to be available, and he asked that rancher if he thought it would be all right if he took this stone with him as a souvenir back to his ranch in Texas. Something to brag about, something to show his friends. Fortunately, that rancher told him absolutely not.
Yeah.
So he took it away from him, and he kept it in his home for several years. At some point, he sold his ranch, talking about the same fellow in Cimarron, sold his ranch and brought the stone to the St. James Hotel and asked the then owner of the hotel if he would like to have it to display in the lobby. And of course, the hotel owner, a fellow by the name of Ed Sitzberger, told him sure. So I see where evidently this fella that brought the stone down from the mountains in the back of his pickup, I suspect that he tied a rope around the top of this and pulled it over where it had been standing and broke it off there because it's very clearly, obviously broken down there on the bottom. And when I saw that, right away in my mind triggered a question. I wonder if the rest of it is still buried up there in the mountains somewhere where this guy broke it off. And if I could find the bottom part of it and match it up to this, then I could know what direction the stone was facing, north, south, east, west, where it was placed, where it was standing. By then, I had already in my mind made up my mind that this was a Templar Knights obelisk that had been placed there intentionally a long time ago, and that was pretty obvious by the condition of the obelisk. It's very worn, and fortunately, the symbols are all very clearly carved on there. So they have withstood time. Okay, but if I could know where the rest of it is, if anybody someday can find it and know that what it is, then we can match it up, and like I said, we can know what direction it faced.
So the rancher, the rancher who got it, he didn't know where this hunter got it from. He had no clue. The hunter didn't tell him. We don't know who this hunter is or anything like that.
Well, fortunately, this hunter was somewhat familiar with the area, and he said that he had found it on the Ring Place. The Ring Place was a very small settlement way up in the mountains. It was a property that had been purchased by a fellow by the name of Timothy Ring. He bought the place to raise cattle on. Okay, so this was I'm going to say probably early 1800s, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And we know where that place is. It's on the map. I know where it is. Mm-hmm. And that is where this guy said that he got it. Okay. So that's where it came from. Now, let me show you. Let me show you the fourth side to the stone. Once again, the sun symbol. Once again, I see a bar diagonally carved onto it and something carved inside. It almost appears to be like a human shape of some kind, but I can't tell. It's not clear enough. Once again, the parapets on top of King Solomon's temple. Another field where something was carved on there, letters, numbers, something. And once again, the Templar Knight cross. Okay? And below that, those same letters that appeared on the other three sides are there. And once again, the bottom of it has this round circular carving on it here. And of course the bottom that is broken off.
Yeah.
Now I suspect that the bottom portion of it is going to have the rest of what probably is a circle and whatever was carved inside that circle. And who knows what else might be carved on the portion of this obelisk-shaped stone, or how deep it is. This happens to be 42 inches tall. Is it another 42 inches down into the ground? There's no way to know. Now,
For it to be sticking up, you'd think they'd have quite a bit in the ground to hold it straight
Well,
up. Yeah.
probably, yeah. I mean, that's open for discussion.
Yeah.
Now, I suspect that it's pretty deep in the ground. I say that because the force that it took, tying a rope around the top of it, the force that it took to pull it over and cause it to break off here means that there was quite a bit more down below.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the rest of it would have popped up.
Yeah.
Okay? You can expect that would have happened. So, I guess you can imagine by now how excited I was when I brought those pictures home and started going over them and researching and trying to figure out, what this was and who did it and why. And I look at the stone, and in my opinion, the stone is not natural to that area of the mountains. Okay, that area is old volcanic area. The stone there is not similar to this. In talking to other people who have seen the stone and seen the surface of it, they are telling me that they suspect that it's a limestone. And recently, now I should say that I mentioned earlier, I've been studying this since 2013. That's 5 years ago. Okay? And it's only been in the last year that I've been able to get some very good information.
Cool.
And it's only been in the last couple of months that I met a fellow by the name of Sean Williamson, who is a professional sculptor. And he happens to be from Scotland, which is where I suspected all along that this may have been done. And when I sent him pictures of it, he told me that he felt that this resembled very much the same type of limestone that is used or was used to build castles.
Really?
In Scotland. And he suspects that it may have been quarried there.
Really?
Okay? Now, if that were the case, that would go right along with my suspicion that this is obviously something produced by the Templars. So I guess we need to talk about the Templars a little bit now.
Let me ask you real quick. So when you first seen it, you thought it was Templars because of the cross? Or
Yes.
So you'd done a little bit of research on the Knights Templars before that?
Yes. I mentioned that I've written quite a few books, and one of my books that I wrote, I got very interested in the early Hebrew people, and the early Hebrew and the early Jewish people, because here in New Mexico, in the last, I would say 10, 15 years, there has been a lot of activity among the Spanish people, because there has been evidence that some of the Spanish people in New Mexico, through DNA testing, have considerable Jewish DNA.
Really?
Yes, and what it appears happened, how that appears to have happened, is that in 1492, coincidentally when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, in 1492, the King and Queen of Spain expelled the Jews from Spain. At that time, there was a large population of Jews that lived in Spain, worked there, were in the government, were very prominent people, professionals, but suddenly the Pope and the King of Spain decided that they were going to have an inquisition, and they were forcing all of these Jews out of Spain. They gave them a choice: either convert to Catholicism or die. So there wasn't much choice.
No.
Well, actually, there was a third choice, and that was leave Spain. Okay? So about that time, there was quite a bit of exploration and colonization in the New World, in what is now Mexico and what is now New Mexico. Spanish explorers and colonists were coming to the New World to open up this whole new area for Spain. Well, that was an opportunity for a lot of these Jewish people who were professionals, like I said. They took on Spanish names, disguised themselves, took on Spanish names, and sailed across with the colonists and explorers that were coming here. They were able to, in secret, make their way up into what is now New Mexico, along with the new colonists that were coming into New Mexico. I'm talking about the period of 1600. 1598, 1600. So, a lot of those people who had been living in Spain, who had been Jewish, secretly came across and became part of the population. They took on Spanish names, and they looked like the Spanish people, so there was not too much reason to suspect who they were. Since then, like I said, over the last 10, 15 years or so, there has been a lot of interaction there in what has been referred to as the crypto-Jewish people. Crypto meaning hidden. Okay? So there has been a lot of Spanish people who have come forward and said, hey, in my family, my grandmother used to practice certain customs, things that she did in the home, that later we find were the same types of things that people in the Jewish communities in the Middle East and in Spain had been practicing.
Really?
That was one clue. There were several other clues, and later on, including DNA, that proved that these people were, in fact, of the Jewish population of Spain at the time of the Inquisition in 1492.
So I got to ask you, maybe you're going to get to this, and so if I'm derailing you or getting ahead of you, just
Go
slap
ahead.
me. So the Decalogue stone there in Los Lunas, New Mexico, that's 10 Commandments written in Hebrew. So you feel that that's part of that group that came over then?
No,
Okay.
I feel, and I have visited the stone several times, my wife and I.
I've been there myself.
Yeah, okay. I have visited it, and in my opinion, and in the opinion of others, it predates the Spanish by considerable time.
Okay.
It appears that it was done way before the first colonists, European colonists, came into the New World. It appears that even in the writing, there are some letters that are apparently Greek, Hebrew, and Phoenician. Now, the Phoenician part of it interested me because I don't know if I mentioned the title of it, but I started out this part of our conversation by saying that I had done quite a bit of research on the Jewish people.
Uh-huh.
And I wrote a book titled The Jews in New Mexico, Centuries of Contact. And the implication there is that the Jewish people and the people of New Mexico have so many things in common since as long as they've been here.
Uh-huh.
So, getting back to the Decalogue stone, what is referred to here sometimes as Mystery Rock on Hidden Mountain, that stone appears to have Phoenician writing on it, which would make sense to me, because the Phoenicians were masters of the sea. sailors.
Yeah.
The Phoenicians lived in the same time as King Solomon. In fact, King Solomon and the Phoenicians, they shared in a navy that was referred to as King Solomon's Navy, and it was also referred to as the Navy of Tarshish. Tarshish was a place in what is now Spain, and let us not get into that because that's a whole 2-hour program there, okay? But once again, referring to this Phoenician letters that are in that writing on that stone, caused me to do some more research on it. Now, among the effort of the officials of that time, archaeologists from the University of New Mexico, trying to prove that that stone was or was not, in fact, a true artifact, because some people claimed it was a hoax.
Right.
And there's always going to be people like that, okay? But anyway, one of the things they did, okay, to try to get information on the stone was they interviewed an old man from Los Lunas. And the old man said, yes, I've known about this stone since I was a kid, since I was a child. He said, my grandfather used to herd sheep in this area. At one time, that was a Spanish land grant there. And he said, this old man, he said, my grandfather used to herd sheep here, and he brought me here when I was a little boy and showed me this rock. Now, this old man was already in his 80s. So, if you just go back in time, how old was his grandfather when he showed that stone to him?
Right.
Okay? Way before the 1900s, obviously. Probably before the 1800s. So anyway, this old man said, and my grandfather said that his grandfather had showed it to him.
Oh, really?
So now you go back another multiple of years.
Yeah.
And it becomes very old. Now the other thing that he said that was really interesting to me, he lives in Los Lunas. In Los Lunas, there is a pueblo of Indians. I'm trying to think of the name of that pueblo. It's called the Isleta Pueblo. The Indians that live there are Isleta Indians, okay? He said that his grandfather had talked to one of the elders of the Isleta Pueblo. And they had discussed this stone, this Decalogue stone. He said that the elder of the Indian Pueblo had told him that in their oral history, they talk about the Rio Grande, which runs right down through that area. At one time, way before the Europeans came into this area, the Rio Grande ran wild. I mean, it was a wide, raging river. Very wide, because there was no dams or anything to slow it down from its origins. So there was plenty of water running down the Rio Grande. Now, theoretically, not theoretically, but in fact, from the Gulf of Mexico, which the Rio Grande empties into, from the Rio Grande, you can actually sail a ship up the Rio Grande at that time. Okay? It was that wide and that deep.
Really?
You could sail a ship up into that area. That is how this fellow that supposedly pecked that message on the stone said that he got hit to that point. He had come up and been marooned there. The other crewmen that were with him had died or had been killed by Indians. Okay? Now,
this is the Los Lunas stone you're talking about that's pecked.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now,
and where did you get? Where did you get? This is what the Indians are saying. This is what the elders of the Indian tribe are saying. Okay.
Yes. To this old Spanish man. Okay.
Okay.
Now, I'll tell you at this point that old man's name was Simon Serna.
Really?
Okay? And I became very interested because I had already done a genealogy of the Sernas of New Mexico. So I frantically searched for his name to see where he fit in our family genealogy. But to get back to that old Indian fella telling this oral history story, he said that among the old Indians, there was a story of having seen this huge white bird swimming up the river. And on the back of this huge white bird were men. And the white bird struck something in the river and caused the white bird to roll onto its side, and the men fell off the bird and died. Okay? So do you get the connection there?
Yeah.
The big white bird was obviously not a bird. It was a ship.
Yeah.
A sailing ship. And this old man said that obviously the man that had carved that stone was one of the survivors of that crew of men riding on the back of a white bird. Okay?
Did they place in their oral history a time frame when this happened?
Well, not really, because the Indian people, they refer to time by when the people lived. The grandfather, the mother, the father, the grandfather, etc. For them back then, they kept no record of years and dates, obviously. So, if we're not careful, this can turn into a 5-hour interview, okay?
Okay. So
let me say that when I got started with this research, there was so much to learn. I made a lot of discoveries, and I tabled some of them off to the site for further research later. And when I had enough information, I thought, well, it's probably time for me to start arranging this into a book. Right about that time, now this is about almost 2 years ago, I got an email from a fellow, totally out of the blue. And he said, let me back up just a little bit. In May of last year, I was interviewed by a local television station here in Albuquerque, KRQE TV 13. They did an interview with me, and I showed them my models of the stones, and it went viral, okay? After we did that interview on TV, the next day I started getting phone calls with information, with questions about it. One of them was a fellow that sent me an email and said, hey, he said, that sure looks like a stone that I saw in an article in California a few years ago. And I said, wow, you mean there's another one of these, or is it the same one? So I tracked down the guy that had written that article, and he happened to be a hiker. He and a group of friends loved hiking, especially up in the raw country, like we have in northern New Mexico. And he had written an article, and in the article he had a picture of another stone that was still standing up there.
Really?
I almost fainted. I couldn't believe that there was another one like it that is still standing up there. So at this point, let me show you that other stone that this fellow sent me the pictures of. Can you see this picture?
Yep.
Okay, look at the similarities.
Same crosses, same Knights Templar crosses.
Exactly, to the other. But this one has some interesting symbols carved onto it. for one thing, there are the letters, capital N, capital D, a D or a G here, and what appears to be numbers next to these letters. Okay? Now, I could not understand what they were, but I assumed when I first saw it that because there was the letter N and the letter D, I assumed they were Roman numerals.
Yeah, I'm just going to say
And I thought, well, maybe they are Roman numerals with the date of this stone. Okay, I set that aside, and I started looking at the other symbols that are on here. Namely, this particular one, which you cannot see clearly, but it is on the other side of this stone, which let me show you now. This is another side of that same stone that's standing, and you can see that it's firmly onto the ground, okay?
Uh-huh.
Here is the Templar cross that appears on all four sides of both stones. Here is the 8-point star that identifies to the Templars. The 8-point star is a representation of the same Templar cross. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points.
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points. So this is another way to display the Templar cross. But this particular object here is what really caught my attention. By then, by the time that I began to research this, I had already begun searching into Scotland, into what is called the Kilmartin Church. The Kilmartin Church is in Scotland, and it's famous because around the outside of the church are tombs, graves of Templar knights. And at the time that they were placed there, they had limestone slabs, the same material, and on the slabs were carved images of those knights. Okay? Now, over time, they began to become weathered and appear to be suffering from the weather. So the people from the Kilmartin Church gently removed them and brought them inside the church and stacked them up against the wall so that they wouldn't be damaged any more than they were. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of it, but it's in my book. Okay.
Okay.
When you look at those slabs, at those grave stones that were full-size grave stones, all of them contain a picture of a knight standing in what appears to be a peaked doorway. Okay, I contend King Solomon's Temple, one of the entrances there. The knight is standing there with his feet spread apart and a lance in one hand and a sword in the other hand. And the same image appears on all of these stones. When I looked at that and when I saw this stone, can you see?
Yep.
Can you see a man here standing in what appears to be a doorway?
Yep.
And if you look very closely, he's holding a lance in one hand.
Oh, my
and
heck.
He's holding a sword in the other hand.
Wow.
So a direct match, identical, to the Templar Knight gravestones in the Kilmartin Church. Now, for me, that iced it for me. I mean, I had no doubt in my mind that I was talking Templar Knights, and it was pretty much a matter of trying to understand what the message is on those stones. So, getting back to the stone that is found standing.
So let me derail you for 1 second. So for those that don't know, the Knights Templars in the 1300s, and I don't know exactly when in the 1300s, they had amassed such a huge amount of wealth that the King of France, he didn't like that. In fact, the King of France was indebted to the Knights Templar, and so he put an expulsion order type thing out and rounded them all up. Well, they had a huge amount of treasure that they've got from King Solomon's temple. They found his treasure, and in the middle of the night, they took that treasure because they heard about the King of France was doing this expulsion order on them, and they put it on them ships and sailed off somewhere. Nobody knows where. Okay, take it away.
Exactly. Thank you. That was great. Exactly correct. Okay. Now, where they took that treasure and how they took it is that, like you said, those Templar Knights had become wildly rich. Okay. Over the time that they had been going on crusades back and forth, because the royalty in Europe, kings, princes, rich people, had donated so much money to them because of what they were doing. And the Pope in Rome was pushing the people in Europe to contribute money and land and wealth in any form to the Templars. They had become wildly rich, like you said. Now, it was not just the treasure of King Solomon, which was almost incomprehensible. It was huge, the amount of treasure that King Solomon had. Now, over the ages, over time, he was invaded by the Moorish people, and they succeeded in destroying the temple, and they took all the treasure that they could get their hands on. Okay? They took it with them. Now, over time, I'm going to cut this real short.
Okay.
Over time, the Roman Empire came into power, and they took the treasure away from the people that had it. So now the Roman emperor had the treasure. In time, the Roman emperor fell to the Visigoths, the people of Central Europe. The Visigoths were a wild people, but they grabbed the treasure and any other treasure that they could along the way, and they took it away from the Romans. Over time, they were defeated by the Norsemen, the Vikings, the Norsemen. They were defeated, and now the treasure was huge, but now it was in the hands of these Normans. Well, it's quite a long story, but ultimately the treasure once again fell into the hands of the Templar Knights. Now, the Templars, in the very beginning, the period of 1181, okay, is when they first went to Jerusalem, and there was 9 of them, and they succeeded in finding King Solomon's treasure that was still buried deep below ground. So this added to the treasure. Ultimately, these Templar Knights became wildly rich, like we've been saying. And they were very forward thinkers, okay? They had built for them ocean-going vessels. Actually had 16 of them that they had tied in the harbor of New Rochelle in France. Now, they arranged to have those vessels ready because they knew what was coming with King Philip, okay? Now, before King Philip could round them all up, many of these Templar Knights loaded that treasure onto these ships and sailed away to Scotland. And the Sinclair family had been very favorable to them. The Sinclair family in Scotland gave them refuge in what is known as Rosslyn Chapel, which you've probably heard of in the movies and etc. Yeah. They were able to hide this treasure there long enough so that they could get their vessels to Scotland, and from there sailed across the Atlantic. Now, some of it, of that treasure, is said to be in the bottom of Oak Island. Okay?
Uh-huh.
In the Oak Island well. Some of that treasure is said to have been carried on vessels into the Gulf of Mexico. There has been evidence of not stones like these, but other stones that have carvings on them that indicate that the Templar Knights were there on the shores of Brazil, Venezuela, the Panama area,
Really?
and as I contend, a ship sailed up the Rio Grande, up as far as they could, and wound up in northern New Mexico, where they placed these obelisk-shaped stones with what I contend is a message in symbols that they would understand.
Uh-huh.
Okay? Now, was there a map, or was there something that had the plan, let's just say, of what was going to be carved on here and what it meant and how to decipher that? That's the big, big mystery. That's what I've been searching for.
Ah.
I have found no trace of anything that exists, okay, that these Templars would have developed. A map of sorts to be able to decipher all these symbols.
Right.
But in my mind, there is no doubt that these symbols are a message, okay, that other Templars who would come later would be able to interpret and find whatever it was that was so important that they would go through all the trouble of doing all of this and taking it to an obscure place up in the mountains of northern New Mexico where there was nobody at that time. What better place to hide whatever you want to hide? Now, that to me is the end result of all of this. There has to be a treasure of some kind, either up there in the mountains of northern New Mexico or at a place determined by whatever the message is on these stones. Okay? Now, I don't know if I showed this to our friends, but this is my book that I wrote about the stones and about this whole mystery. Now, unfortunately, this is my last copy, so I have no more copies available. However, if anybody is interested, you can get a copy of it as an ebook on Amazon if you go to my website, which is www.louisserna, and that's spelled Louisserna. If you go to that website, you can see the Knights Templar book, and you can actually read it for free because it's an ebook. And if you like it, you can buy it for a few bucks, whatever it is. And if you don't, you can just return it, and no problem.
Huh.
Cool. On my website are also several of my other books, if you're interested. Okay. Now, I don't know that I gave our friends my email address.
No,
I'll do that now.
I was just going to say, what if somebody else has seen some more of these stones and need to get a hold of you?
Oh, I'll tell you, I would come off this chair like my email address is sernabook@comcast.net. That's SERNABOOK @comcast.net. Okay? So those are two ways to get a hold of me, either by email or through my website.
Okay. And I'll put a link at the bottom of my page so that they can just go and click on it, and I'll put it here below you so they can read it. So.
Great. Okay. I had made a few notes here to talk about, and it looks to me like we've pretty well covered it. There is just something else that I'd like to share with our friends. Well, a couple of things. On this stone that is standing up in the mountains of northern New Mexico, there is this particular symbol carved on one side of that stone. And I think it's pretty obvious that this is a chalice.
Yeah.
Perhaps a reference to the Holy Grail. Would I be so bold as to say that the Holy Grail is part of the treasure that's in this whole story? I don't know. But why would it be there if it didn't have something to do with that? Okay. Now, on this side of the stone, now we see a very bold carving of that Templar Knight that I said appears on the gravestones in Kilmartin Church. The feet spread apart, the hands reaching out to each side. You can't see what he's holding, but above that Templar Knight, in this apparent doorway, we see a Templar cross. And above it, we see an arched doorway. So what does that mean? So many questions here. Now, here is what I wanted to share with our friends. Here is that letter M. Here is that letter D. And something else there. Over time, as I researched all of this information, I discovered that there is what is called a Templar DM code. I don't know what the DM stands for. It doesn't say. But it's referred to as the DM code.
Really?
And if you look on the internet, you can find the Templar DM code. And what it is, it's a graph of letters and numbers and some symbols that if you can arrange them in the proper order, who knows what it says.
Really?
So this is what I think is the key to solving part of this mystery. There's so much to it. Now, one other thing to mention here. We talked about the Templar Knights and their ships that they used to sail away from Scotland with their treasure. Here is a Templar cross, but it's very unique.
Yeah, it's got them
in the shape that it is. You see these?
Yeah.
What it look like bones, okay?
Yeah.
Now, this cross is referred to as an anchor cross. An anchor cross. Sometimes it is shown with points on it, which would make it look like anchor.
Okay.
But these rounded ends on it and this notch in there identify it as an anchor cross. Now, anchor cross, perhaps suggesting that it has something to do with sailing ships.
Yeah.
Anchors are found on ships.
Yep.
And here is a hint. Here is a hint that a Templar Knight perhaps was on a sailing ship, because here is the anchor cross. So, all of this information, okay, and much, much, much more that I have uncovered, much more to uncover, much more to learn, but once again, I'm 77 years old, and I don't know how much longer, I can do this.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of information that I would be glad to share with anybody who is seriously interested in solving this mystery. I said earlier, that I had been interviewed on TV. The next day, I said that I had received quite a bit of emails, and well, I went on YouTube because one of my friends called me and told me, "Hey, Louis, I just saw you on TV." And I said, "Oh, wow, And he said, "Yeah," he said, "you're on YouTube with some stones, and there's over 17,000 views on it." And that was the day after.
Wow.
So since then, I have noticed that there are several sites on YouTube that you can visit, and they have my interview on there. I'm surprised all the people that have taken that interview and posted it on YouTube, I guess out of interest.
Well, it's definitely, when I seen an article and the stones, and when I seen them stones, I was really interested. And then when I found your name, man, I was forgetting a hold of you because I wanted to know the story.
Well, once again, I appreciate what you're doing, and I guess we can tell our friends, that are going to watch this, that you and I intend, to produce a YouTube presentation, and I'm anxious to see what that's going to look like.
Yep.
And hopefully, we'll get some response from somebody that knows something.
I know exactly what it is to have a bunch of information, to some mysteries, because I shared with you, about the mystery glyphs I've been tracking around, which some of them are in your state, and anyway, man, it would just be nice to find the key to unlock the whole mystery.
Oh, that would be nice. That would be nice.
Well, hey, Louis, man, I really, really appreciate you sharing this with us because it's real interesting. It's definitely out of place, and I appreciate you a lot. Thanks, Louis.
It's my pleasure. So hopefully we'll hear from somebody.
Yeah, and with that, that's a wrap. Thanks, Louis.
Okay, we'll talk to you again, Terry.